Yeah, on the cover there is one of our favorite people. We're going to tell you a little bit more about him at the end. But the way we're going to do this is I'm going to take the first half and talk about the work that I'm most involved in. And then Steph, the wonderful work of health and mercy ministry that she's involved in. So again, as she said, without further ado, let us go here. We come before you both with heavy hearts and with joyful hearts. We had the funeral for Steph's mom yesterday and the burial committal this morning. And we were very gracefully offered to back out of this, let another missionary do this by the organizers of this event. But she, above all people, would have wanted us to go forward with this. She came out to Africa 4 times at the birth of each of our children, supported missions all her life, and put that love of Jesus and missions in the heart of her daughter and all of her family. So we're a go today on this.
In memory of Mom.
Yep. And when they had prayed, the place which they were gathered together was shaken, and they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and continued to speak the word of God with boldness. I see a lot of parallels, especially in the French-speaking, Francophone, meaning French-speaking work in Africa. That tumult and societal upheaval led to the growth of God's church, much like it did in the book of Acts. In Togo, Burkina Faso, and Benin, Togo was the first French-speaking nation that our Missouri Synod sent missionaries to. They were the victims of warfare, but because of that, many became children of God. And you see where they are on the map. Neighboring Ghana, an English-speaking nation, they had tribal conflict in the 1970s, and it was very brutal. The Moba population there was battling it out with the neighboring Concomba, and many Moba were forced to go across the border for safety into northern Togo. And because of that movement of a mass of people, the missionary who was working with him, Walt DeMoss, worked with them, I should say, moved with them and brought the word of God amongst the suffering of displaced people. And by virtue of that, we began our work in French-speaking Africa. We began work in Nigeria, English-speaking Africa, about 80 years ago, in Ghana some 60 years ago. So just in 1980 did we venture into French-speaking Africa, and not by our will, but by God's will. And we have a new church there. And this was a fairly recent picture. Walt DeMoss is now with his Lord Jesus in heaven as of about 1.5 years ago. Helena, bless her heart, is still with us. A heart full of mission to this day. And we were all of 23 years old when we met them. And then they must have thought we were babies when we first deployed to Togo. We got involved. We arrived in 1988, and by 1990, I got involved in planting a church in a town of about 30,000, which was the capital city of Moba land. It's about 300,000 people spread across the north of Togo, the south of Burkina Faso, a little bit into Benin and Ghana on the east and west. And this was the heart of it, the biggest city, if you want to call it a city. It did have 30,000 people, and we began work in a schoolhouse with an evangelist baptizing there. You see, that was Batut, one of our earliest evangelists. At the same time, we very early saw the need to be training leaders up. Very early, we sent guys into village work with the idea of identifying leadership early and working only with 1 or 2 church plants, not numerous ones, so that they could focus discipleship. And because of that, by 1996, I had a hand in overseeing the construction of what became known as the Centre Luthérien d'Études Théologiques, the Lutheran Center of Theological Studies. And I was one of the early teachers there. You see me when I had hair, teaching a class of our first students. And the first crop, from that seminary were these 5 gentlemen, all Togolese, all called to serve the church in northern Togo. And all of them, except the one second to right. This is the one who was my language helper, Jabigu Chembianja. did not know the Lord. I was able, by the grace of God, to introduce him to him. He went to our seminary eventually, became a pastor, took over my church plant in DePong, but was brought to Jesus a year and a half ago. He left this earth with mouth cancer, and our hearts are very heavy as a result of that. But the other 4 are still active pastors. The church plant, while there was a lot happening around 96, 97. The new church plant in the capital city. Again, we started in the villages and moved into the city, kind of a backwards movement from the way Paul did it. Alpha Omega Lutheran Church was planted, and that church plant started around 1990, and we were able to put up a building by 1996. And these were our kids at that point. The Lord blessed us with 4 children while we lived in Africa. 3 of them are Togolese. 1 is Ghanaian. He was born in the north of Ghana. That would be Jeff. And I put a different picture of Tim in the corner there because he's not looking at the camera. I think this was Easter Sunday. The kids were all dressed up, but they had been in church for approximately 5 hours. It was approximately 1,000 degrees in the building, and it was probably about 2 p.m. by this time, and the sun was in their eyes. Moving on, the next growth of the work in French-speaking Africa, very similar to the movement of peoples that spawned the growth of the church in the Togo, Benin, Burkina Faso area of the map. 1990s, about 12, 13 years of brutal civil war in 2 neighboring countries, Liberia and Sierra Leone. And a lot of people moved over into neighboring Guinea, into refugee camps. And there's a video of it here. I don't think I'm gonna, because we're a little time challenged today.
Like 7 minutes.
Yeah, I'll hit play on it, let it run a little bit. But do you just see the mass of humanity displaced there and the hurt of the people and how much they needed the gospel and what a hellacious place. A lot of our early evangelists / pastors at this point came over as fellow refugees and began preaching the gospel in the camps. And a lot of them were fellow Kisi speakers, but these were Anglophone countries that they were coming from into the French-speaking Guinea. So they were proclaiming the gospel, obviously, in their native tongue, Kisi, with a little help of some of our synod missionaries, who obviously had to speak in English because that's where they were. They didn't speak French yet because they were working in English-speaking countries. Let's see if I can get past that slide. And then now we have a church in neighboring Guinea, which is today a 95% Muslim country. And I think some of you have seen this video. I don't think we have sound going with it. I muted it. But wonderful, beautiful music with those shakers. And it's a different variety there. I've not seen anywhere else on the map of Africa. You will notice the one lady in the right. We didn't know it that day, but she was one of the joyful singers in the group. She, with the visitors in the church that day, she came out. She had lost her child in the night. She had been pregnant and had a stillbirth, and you could just see her trying to be joyful with her sisters. It was a very bittersweet moment there. That war in Liberia spawned the growth of the church in Burkina Faso, just north of Togo. A man named Rufus Nkrumah, who watched his entire family and parents, wife, children, everyone be executed before his eyes in the war, and they let him live. He made his way all the way up to Burkina Faso, and he actually went to this is an 85% Muslim country, went to the Department of the Interior and asked them, where is the Christian church least represented on the map of your country? And they actually told him, go out to the east to Fada and Gourma. And he did. He was a layman. He began planting the church there, and he heard about us, about a 2-hour motorcycle ride away in northern Togo, and we had our seminary there. He showed up at our door in the year 2000 And we thought, well, who's this guy? And he didn't want money. He didn't want help. Well, he did want help. He said, I'm a layman. I planted this church, and I know you guys are pastors, training pastors. Can you come help me with this? I've gone with as far with this as I can. And if you're wondering what that picture is, he died, I think, in 2007, and he is buried right next to his first church plant. I don't have a picture of him anymore. So let's now fast forward to 2016 from those early days. Steph and I served a parish in Missouri for 10 years. After Togo, we served just a couple of brief short years in Ivory Coast, or Cote d'Ivoire, as its official French name is, but were evacuated because of civil war. I came back and served a parish in Missouri for 10 years, but our hearts were still in Africa. We were becoming empty nesters, had the desire to go back, and we were called to the neighboring country of Burkina Faso, where we have this newest French-speaking church, and that would become a base of operations because we were getting involved in other French-speaking nations too. I'm just going to flick through a few pictures of the city, what it looks like. Beautiful monument there. And that does not do the city justice. It was a Marxist regime, and they had the attitude of, and it's always in the top 10 poorest countries in the world. Burkina Faso is. We love the people, some of the gentlest, nicest people in the world, but very poor. And the idea was everyone a motto. And so they are literally there by the thousands, and it's very dangerous driving there. But thankfully, you can't go very fast. Our car probably made contact with moto riders going all directions around us, probably 5 or 6 times over the 3 years or so that we were living in the city.
Tell them what Burkina Faso means.
Oh, it means it's the combination of the 2 major languages in the country. The president made it up, and it means people of integrity. And they really, really do try to live up to that. We see the least corruption among officials there. Even with the Muslim overlay to the country, they just kind-hearted, generous people, warm people. And I just wanted to give you a little flavor of what the ingenuity that poverty brings about. The necessity is the mother of invention. I think this guy's pretty sharp in how to get his tires transported, but this guy's got it on him. Those are, what's a pentad? Guinea fowl. Those are animals he's carrying to market on his moto. It's just amazing what they are able to do with the little that they have. We had a little home in Burkina Faso, and that became ground zero for a $100,000 project sponsored by Mission Central in Iowa to get theological materials into the hands of the French leaders, because they would leave our seminaries and go out into their villages and maybe have a Bible, maybe. And we have very little in the French language because the Reformation never penetrated those lands much. And by the way, I think God has a sense of humor. The population of French-speaking Africa is about 350 million. And I think it's the church growth with the most potential at least in Africa, as I see it. And I think my hope is by the time Jesus returns, there will be more French-speaking Lutherans in halls of heaven than there are German or English. I'm rooting for them. Here is the Clet that we founded in 1996, recently. Probably this is a vintage 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah. Unfortunately, our American missionaries are not there anymore for the same reason we are not in Burkina Faso, because these churches are persecuted. The Muslims I've spoken of, the more radical ones are kidnapping missionaries and burning schools and shooting pastors in front of their congregations, stopping buses. And if you don't say Allahu Akbar, they will shoot everyone in the bus. Lots of atrocities like that. Nothing has happened in northern Togo, but this is only 30 kilometers from the border of Burkina Faso. And some of the people who are doing these atrocities in neighboring Burkina Faso hide away when the authorities are after them in camps in northern Togo. And all it would take is some guy on a motorcycle riding onto that campus with an automatic weapon to do lots of harm to lots of people very quickly. And so our prayers are with those people. Michael Wildauer on the left there with the beard and the glasses is
right.
on the right, I guess. Has transferred out and is preparing for work in Belize. Ryan McDermott, who was a specialist in deaf ministry, is now, where is he? Wisconsin? Madison, Wisconsin. Jacob Goggart is still with our team because he's planning to move from his home in northern Togo to where we have recently moved because of the Muslim incursions. It's both a strategic and what's the other one?
Imperative.
Yeah, I can't think the opposite of strategic, but
Tactical.
I lose so many words as I get older. Anyway, we'll move on. But this is Jacob. He's soon to hopefully be our neighbor, and we'll show you where that's going to be here soon. But this was him teaching a class at the CLET, a student learning there. And we will see the fruits of that shipment sponsored by Mission Central. We were the transshipment point. Books and Bibles, hymnals, you name it, went to 18 African nations. And the CLET got a lot of them. And this is part of the shipment that they were unpacking that first day they arrived. And you see that library that did not have nearly that much stuff prior to the shipment from Mission Central being given to them. And this is Philip Magnus. He's a part-time member of our team. He was called to that, and he has made other short-term trips out. He's a church musician, a very gifted one. And he works particularly with our Congolese students, who are the most gifted musicians, I think, in all of Africa. They really added color to the liturgy. He's helped them put kind of a fusion to the traditional liturgy that I wish I could worship in that church every day. It brings a unique African life to it, and it's still the ancient liturgy. And that's church with on a Sunday morning in the schoolhouse there at the seminary. And right now we have 8 French nations represented as students there. We have reached out into the belly of Africa. 3 Central African nations now are sending men to be trained there, in addition to Guinea, Togo, Benin, and Burkina Faso. And the presidents of those churches gather on a yearly basis with the missionaries to discuss the operations and the strategy of the CLET and actually beyond that now. We've established some new seminaries in the region too. We'll tell you about that. The man in the middle there is Dan McMiller. He is my boss. He is the executive director of World Mission. And there we were at a chapel gathering there, and it was my day to preach. And we would hold these meetings at a Catholic retreat center in northern Togo. So I'm going to bring you through the countries that we're in now, and you're going to see a pattern of when we do visits. Joseph Napon, again, one of my favorite people. We're going to tell you a little more about him later. That's one of his elders. That was after church one Sunday. We stopped. We were on the back of their motos going back home, and we stopped to refresh ourselves with a beverage.
And barbecue goat.
Yeah. But the church plants that Joseph has done there are around the urban area of Burkina Faso, but not near the city center. Land prices are too expensive there. And even near the city center, these places are inaccessible most of the year because of rains. And so we will drive as close as we can get. They'll meet us on the side of the road, and we go in by moto. Which
is terrifying.
Yeah. Steph hates that. She's a trauma nurse, has a history of that, and has seen what motos do to people. So she's really given it a go, getting on the back of one of those things. But this is in Tansega, the mother church of his recent church plants on a Sunday morning. And I'm not in it because I took the picture. There's Steph on the side there. He is a ball of fire. We put mission shoes on these guys. We're not training these guys to be ivory tower pastors, but to be missionary church planters. and doing baptism. And remember, this is a country that is 85% Muslim, with militants active now, burning churches and killing pastors in front of their people, and he is openly baptizing people. I was blessed to partake in distributing the Lord's Supper, and that's just a neat picture. I like that picture. And this was a confirmation, right? Yeah, someone who was preparing an adult confirmation, and that was going on one Sunday. And moving on to Togo, that's a small church, but growing rapidly where Joseph is, and we'll give a little more detail on the end as we kind of go around the bend with the other countries that we're active in. I don't know why that slide ended up first, but in Togo we have done 2 Mercy Medical teams. I'm only going to show you the one slide right now because Steph's going to tell you more in detail about that work later. In Benin, that started with missionaries from Togo going over to work with a plant that happened in the capital city in the early 1990s. Tiny thing. Now there is a presence in the north, and this guy is a northerner, and he is their first ordained pastor in that church. It's still a very tiny church, but he is planting churches in the north of the country now. And while the work in the capital city has waned a little bit, it is very active in the north. And I think we have a couple Beninese in the recent crop of people at the Clet as well that will be joining him soon. In Guinea, this was about in July 2018, I think. Jacob and I and Stephanie, we travel together as a team often. We give theological seminars to strengthen them in their Lutheran teaching. That's Jacob teaching his. We took turns. I taught for 2.5 days. He taught for 2.5. And then Steph always works with the women, almost always works with the women, and which has been a beautiful thing. It's been eye-opening for me. It's a male-dominant society, and the church, in a sense, is male-dominated because it's all male clergy. So when you plant a church, and particularly at this stage, it's going to be men working with men. And often the missionaries would come in, the men would go off and work together, and the women would cook, and their needs would not be met, even though women are always the backbone of the church. And so Steph can come in and encourage the ladies, and while the men come in and work with the pastors, and it's just a wonderful tag team, and that these women can be affirmed with being reached out to, and again, she'll give you more detail on what she's teaching them when her turn comes. But there's a group picture after the seminar. You see the president of the church, a solid Christian man, and a 95%. He's one of my favorite people too, a humble leader. Julien Cote D'ivoire. His last name's even hard for me to say. Oh, by the way, the guy in the beard and the hat back there is Tim Heine, who has been in Africa for 40 years now. He and Beth are godparents to our 3rd son. Dear friends of ours, and he is doing outreach among Muslims, about a 2-hour drive from where the center of our refugee planted church are. They're in the forest. He's up near the border.
2-day drive, not 2 hours.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess it is 2 day. Yeah, yeah. It's a good thing I have Steph. She keeps me on the straight and narrow. Cote d'Ivoire is the only country that we've made 3 attempts to plan trips there, and the most recent cancellation, I think, was because of COVID. I don't remember. There's been always a reason to have to cancel going to Cote d'Ivoire, but they were a church plant out of the warfare. They're a refugee church too. Their churches are in the extreme western part of the country, and I think they've moved all the way to the other side of the map with a few church plants in Abidjan. It was about 3 million people when we were there. I don't know how many now, but it's a huge urban area and doing some urban outreach. But it's mostly rural and in the east and in the daughter of warfare, just like in Guinea. But we do have a few pictures, and Rev Gege Mark is the guy in the gray shirt there. He's the president of that church, and was the president of the Union of Francophone Churches whenever we would meet to discuss the affairs of the seminaries and the cooperation of the churches. I think he's still president. No, the guy from Burundi is, which we'll get to. Yeah, next. Burundi is a tiny nation just north of Rwanda. Most people know of Rwanda because of all of the killings that happened there. The Burundi was somewhat involved in that, and so they really need the gospel there. This one, they asked us to come not just to work with pastors, they don't have a lot of those, just to give catechesis to everybody, any church member who wanted to come. And that's what we did. We went through the 6 chief parts of Luther's catechism with them. And I took a few of the chief parts, and Jacob took the other 3. And we taught over, 4 days, 5 days? While Steph and a couple volunteers from the States, both of whom are nurses, Lauren Awe from Nebraska, pastor's daughter, and remind me who you got on the left there.
You said Lauren's name, you're gonna know it.
Yeah.
Andrea Ferguson.
There you go.
From Louisiana.
And again, I'm gonna just letting you know that's happening. Steph's gonna tell you in detail what they do. But the people in Togo cook the best. The people in Congo sing the best. The people in Burundi dress the best. Their costumes are just gorgeous. And this was colorful worship on a Sunday morning. This was one of their singing groups, choirs. And then after the meeting, we had a worship service where 4 children were brought into the family of God through baptism. And we got a very, very wonderful picture of that, very striking picture. And this man, the pastor speaking into the microphone, Fidel Mbundi is the president of that church and is the newly elected president of the union as well. Very, very brand new church. How am I doing on time?
You're good.
Okay. And just a few more pictures of the beautiful costumes. Congo, I put Congo DRC. There are 2 countries that go by Congo, which can be confusing. This DRC is short for Democratic Republic of Congo. Most people are aware of this one if they're aware of either. It's huge. It's about 90 million people and a very troubled country, terrorists of every form, including government soldiers, all at warfare over. It's a rich mining country. In fact, most of the mineral elements that go into our iPhones, these rare metals, come from mines in the Congo and get transshipped at very cheap price to China. And they, increase the price 20-fold and sell it to the West. And these people fight wars over the possession of these lands. And it's just endless warfare. The church is so needed there. Again, you'll see the same thing, a theological seminar. This one, they requested. We did not plant the Central African Lutheran churches. They were planted by European Lutherans. And unfortunately, a lot of them are moving away from biblical truth, ordination of women, support of homosexuality, other things. They heard about us in West Africa, began to contact us. Can you help us train our leaders so that we want to remain faithful to biblical truth? And so we started sending delegations down in there and tried to be very careful not to steal sheep or to look like we were doing that. But if anyone invites you to teach them the truth, you go. And so we have, there's about 5 different Lutheran bodies. There may be as many as 20 in the DRC, the 5 that we're currently exploring relationships with, and have men at the Clet in Togo right now being trained. But anyway, the topic that they wanted was women in the church, because they were coming out of that, with the liberal Lutheran bodies that they had been working with. They wanted some clear and biblical instruction on that. And this was a church visit there. Vast, vast country. It takes up most of the belly of Africa, and just very, very, very troubled. But the dress there is also very beautiful. The headdresses, they don't do that quite as much in West Africa. The women. School visits, they have a couple of Lutheran schools attached to their work there. This one church body in the very far eastern part of the country. When we made this visit, we had to hightail it out of there. Should I tell this story?
I don't know now, we're a half hour in.
Yeah. anyway, the Mai Mai were moving and attacking people, and we got out by the skin of our teeth because of the care and concern of our hosts. But we had a few nervous moments there. We got over into Rwanda and then down into Burundi to get out. But the other Congo is Congo Brazzaville, or just the Republic of Congo. The other is Democratic Republic of Congo. The easier way is Congo DRC or Congo Brazzaville. That's usually how we designate the two. Much smaller country, a population of only 4.5, 5 million compared to the 90-some million in its neighbor. And we have moved to Brazzaville for, tactical was the word I was looking for.
I said it, but you didn't hear me. Yeah.
Tactical reason for the move was the incursion of the Islamist militants, but we have a very strategic reason for going where we did. There's a picture of Congo Brazzaville. We live in the fifth floor apartment. We can see the river and see the capital of Kinshasa, of neighboring DRC, across the mighty Congo River. And that building is in our view from our terrace. They are the only two capitals in the world that face each other across a river. The guy in the corner there was whatever de Brazza. He was a Frenchman based in Algeria who did, yeah, not this guy, the other in the previous slide. But Brazzaville, people often wonder what that came from. It was from this de Brazza guy who did a lot of exploration of the Congo Basin for the French colonists. But the landscape is so different from dry, hot West Africa, dusty, brown. You can see the richness of the area there. They have lots of oil, petroleum wealth on the coastline there. And gorillas, one of the few areas of the world, there's a few countries in the belly of Africa that are still home to gorillas. And we went and saw them one day, and took that picture from about 8 feet away, not on the land. We were in a little boat and he was on the shoreline there. But this is our apartment building that we've moved into. We're living in such a different way than we ever have in Africa. We're never an apartment, never in a highly urbanized area. This was moving day last December. We got there in early December. We lived a very Spartan lifestyle. We had a mattress and a desk, and I think we got the internet hooked up so we could join the rest of the world and live like that for about 3 weeks. And then our goods arrived from their shipment in Togo. They came down to the port and then were trucked up to Brazzaville. But that was move-in day. We're in a very modern apartment. It's built by the Chinese, interesting. And the maintenance crews are all Chinese still. It's a very interesting arrangement there. But the Chinese who built them have sold off the units to local owners. So our landlady lives in the unit next to us. She is from Brazzaville. Ariana was doing an internship in Cameroon when we arrived. And so we were able to arrange her to take a couple weeks of vacation from her work. She came over and helped us move in, and that's our daughter. She's very interested in LBT, Lutheran Bible translators. In fact, her degree in college was in linguistics. And there's our living room being moved into. And we have a wonderful panoramic view from both sides of the living room of downtown Brazzaville.
And it's just so clean.
Yeah.
We've never lived anywhere so clean.
This was the shipment. We brought this down. Again, Jacob Godgert was the one who arranged this. We transshipped it from our house to 19 countries. And the Central African allotment came with our goods down to Congo Brazzaville in the basement of our apartment building. And I was the one who stacked 350 boxes of books in that orderly fashion in about a 4 hours time. And I think my back hurt for about a week. But unfortunately, Jacob was going to come down and work with us to get these distributed to the churches. And then we were repatriated because of COVID. And to this day, they are sitting in our very patient landlord's building in the basement, hopefully not getting too mildewy. But we introduced ourselves with a theological seminar here. You see Brian, I told you about him, a specialist in deaf ministry. trying to help them get deaf ministry started they have quite a large deaf population there. I think the world's largest deaf population is in Ghana, in Dale Castor, who's among our group today, could tell you about that. He's very familiar with that work. This is Steph teaching the ladies. Again, same pattern. The men come in and do theological seminars. Steph does her mainly health and mercy oriented seminars. And we visit churches and their leaders. And this Albert Pungi was the planter of the church in Brazzaville. He left his homeland to go over into the neighboring DRC to work, was exposed to the planters of that church, one of them being Wilbur Kreis, the longtime president of the Lutheran Church of France, who is said to have made as many as 48 two-week visits into the Congo Basin to teach Lutheran theology. And he attended these conferences, and he was a Roman Catholic and became Lutheran, came back with this new faith in his heart and began planting churches in the capital of Brazzaville. Within a year or two, he was arrested because it was not a legal church. It was a Marxist, atheistic regime in charge. They allowed Roman Catholicism because pretty much everyone was that before they set that government up. That was the only legal church, and he spent 3 years in prison. He also has passed away about a year and a half ago. It was St. Augustine was the parish, and these are his sons next to him. They're kind of taking care of that church plant, and there are a couple others in the capital city. But the heart of the church is on the coastline down in Pointe Noire, and they have a regional airline. This was the president of the church, Joseph Mavungu, in the top 5 of my favorite people on earth. Wonderful Christian man. Spent 20 years, part of it in the army of France. He has French citizenship from their colonial days. He studied under President Kreis at his little seminary in the outskirts of Paris for 6 years. Very, very theologically deep man. In a way that in these village churches we've planted in West Africa, we don't have that yet. And so we're looking for him and a couple other people from this region who were grew up a little bit wealthier, a little bit more urban, a little bit more education, and just we're hoping that these guys will be the professors of the faith, teaching in our seminaries in the region. I think we're going to get them there a little bit more quickly. It's been a kind of slow getting these people worked. 3 generations into the worked out of their poverty into better education and opportunities to get degrees, to be professors and things like that. But this was his church plant in the back of some property he owned. Again, even in the relative wealth of the Congo, you see there's still poverty there. He's himself not a wealthy man. We've had one Mercy medical team there. This is Armel Wadika, a man in his 40s, and he particularly has a heart for the Lord. We've had him be a guest professor at the CLET, the seminary in northern Togo. Jacob says he's up all night preparing with 4 or 5 theological references in a Bible in front of him, preparing for class. He's a kind of genius level smart, and we're hopeful that he will lead the charge of people who can be our professors. And he's got a humble servant heart on top of it. I really like Armel. I just included this. This was from the Mercy medical team. It's just a cool picture. Even a blind squirrel can find a nut occasionally. One of us took that with a phone. And this little lady, I'll quickly tell her story. She brought her church attendance booklet that day. She was something like 89 years old. Just the sweetest little lady. She was so proud of her attendance at church. She just melted all of our hearts. And people like this who mean nothing to the world. They're outcasts, they're poor, nobody cares. Jesus cares about them. And through his grace, we care about her. Just love this lady. The Togo Clets during the 2000s were bringing men in, as I said, from 8 different nations, going all the way down in the belly of Africa. It's kind of centrifugal, what do you ever call it? They were coming in and then they were going back out.
We're at
And
40 minutes.
yep, I think I'm getting toward the end of mine.
This is my main job when we do
Yep.
presentations.
But because of that, we've seeded these churches with competent Lutheran shepherds. We're planting churches, but also able to go from one regional one that's way, way overstretched to more localized seminaries. And of course, Congo Brazzaville. This is down in Pointe-Noire. It's not in the capital. Working out of a home, just they renovated a couple rooms to have classes. And they had just as COVID was starting to hit, they got their last classes in for this group. And these guys will be going out for 2-year vicarages. It's 5 men is their first crop. That's similar
And
to
one deaconess.
one deaconess. And the way I hear it, we're new down there, but these men were baptized, confirmed, and trained as pastors, all by French-speaking African men, no outside help. And that is what we are looking for when we plant a church. These 2 quick stories, I'm going to have to probably tell them quick. Joseph Napon, the urban church planter on the perimeter of Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. This is plant number 1 in Tansega. It was a Muslim village, and it was a 2-hour bike ride from where he lived in Ouagadougou, and over bad roads, Chinese-made bike, just wobbly. And he'd get there late in the morning. Of course, they'd have to eat. There's always meal fellowship. He would teach them in the afternoon, and it gets dark regularly because they're near the equator about 6. He'd have to spend the night. Well, they lodged him in a little cement shack that was probably, I don't know, roughly 1,000 degrees, and just on the cement floor with a little mat. And he did this for a year, made the 2-hour bike ride out, and once a week. And about a year into the plant, the elders had been baptized by this point. He had a lot of leaders, in training. He asked the main guy, who was one of the village elders, who had been baptized as a Christian now, my back's getting a little stiff. Can I at least have a mattress, sleep at night? And then they just all laughed. They said, Joseph, we've been testing you. We've had so many people come in here, promise us the moon, at development, this or that. We just remain poor and we're outcast. Nothing has changed. But you've come humbly on a bicycle and told us about this man who came humbly and took on human flesh and took on our sins and went to a cross. And we see you in him. You are real to us, and your message is the truth. And you've passed our test. And from that day on, he brought him into his own home and started joining him in outreach. And this is plant number 9, and he's going through something that was developed by Tim Heine to bring the gospel to illiterate people. And it's from Genesis to Revelation, 60 flip charts, telling the story of salvation in Jesus Christ.
So my job has 2 main prongs. One is educational, which is this community health evangelism, and the other is helping to host Mercy medical teams. Community health evangelism it's a development program, but it's very like grassroots, very user oriented. We don't come in and say, here's everything that's wrong with you and here's how you fix it. We just come in and say, what are the issues that you are facing? How can we work together to help you meet those problems? And most of that is done just through these facilitating these seminars. We teach lessons. This one here was on childbirth. It's amazing and heartbreakingly sad how little women know about their own bodies, even women who've had several children. When you explain what actually is happening in the birthing process, they didn't know any of that. It's all a mystery to them. And at the end of each lesson, at the end of each day, the women are, they divide into groups, and then they teach back to us and show us what have they learned. So this was one of their little skits. And I'm telling you, I like to laugh, and I laugh a lot, but these are some of my favorite things. I just laugh so hard because the ladies are hilarious, but also they just love sharing what they've learned. It's just really, really a neat experience.
The affirmation of these women, many of them,
We'll go to the next
second
slide.
grade education.
Yeah.
It's my favorite part of the outreach.
Yeah. So, like Gary was saying, these, many of these women have very minimal education. Most of them are illiterate. They might have be able to speak some French from some schooling, or, just learning it by hearing it. But, very few of them even have the opportunity to go to high school. Like, that would be amazing if they went to high school. And so at the end of every seminar, I give the women all a certificate. This piece of paper certifies that you know about these topics and that you can teach this information to your friends and family. And I just started doing it kind of on a whim, had no idea how meaningful it would be to people. And this gal in the middle of this picture, her name is Rochelle. She's from Guinea. Never went to school, doesn't have any French. But so when I handed her attestation saying, she had completed the training, all the other ladies wanted their hands, picture with the handshake and everything. Now, Rochelle was going in for the hug. Handshake was not sufficient.
And that you mix in the love of Jesus with the training about the workings of the female body. They're so beaten down in their cultures. They don't understand their own bodies. They live in fear because of what their traditional beliefs teach them all the time. You can teach them that they're fearfully and wonderfully made by a loving God, that he even housed Jesus in the womb of a woman as he, brought him into this world. That the first witnesses to the resurrection were women, how God cherishes women, and it would bring in all these gospel truths as you're teaching them very needed information about the working of their own bodies.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just health lessons. There's lessons about agriculture, lessons, spiritual lessons, Bible studies, just anything you can think of. There's a Che lesson about it. And then the other part of my job, I guess you would say, is to help facilitate Mercy medical teams. And this is a picture, these next several pictures are from a Mercy medical team we had in Sierra Leone. The place where this took place was former missionary housing. Actually, Reverend Ricky and Kim Jacob, they are Tim, our oldest godparents. They were missionaries, and this was their house that they lived in when they were in northern Sierra Leone. When they were there, the breakdown of the population was like 20% Muslim, 80% Christian.
No, 80% everything else. 20% Christian, yeah. Traditional beliefs, yeah.
Gotcha. So anyway, due to the war, I'm sure you've all heard about the civil war in Sierra Leone, which had been a spillover from Liberia. Due to the war, people moving, all different kinds of changes, it had completely flipped. And when we went back there for this Mercy medical team, it's now 80% Muslim population and 20% everybody else. And that's why the leaders of the Lutheran Church in Sierra Leone wanted to have the Mercy medical team here. They wanted to kind of revitalize their work up here, and because this is where the church started. So through this Mercy medical team, we help bring redemption 3 times over from warfare, from pestilence, the illnesses that we see. Ebola. Yeah. Well, I didn't even mention that. Ebola, you guys, I'm sure all heard about Ebola. Sierra Leone was the hardest hit of all the nations. And, there's still, so that was another beautiful thing about the Mercy medical team. Their medical infrastructure was just eviscerated by Ebola. And so we weren't even able to hire a physician to come work with us. There just wasn't one that could come and help us. So they were all community health officers, which are like nurse practitioners or physician assistant here in the US. So I don't think I said all three of them.
The last one is the false teaching of Islam.
Yeah,
bringing
spiritual
the gospel
oppression.
in a
Yeah.
spiritual oppression.
So every morning, I'll kind of walk you through a Mercy Medical team. Every morning we start with morning devotions. And this particular morning, they asked Gary as a visitor to lead the Devo. And the amazing thing about this picture is in that group there, 80% of those people are Muslim listening to the gospel. Just a amazing way to reach out to people with God's word.
I don't know that has ever happened anywhere ever, to be honest with you. It's amazing.
So the first thing is registration. People wait patiently in line for hours on end getting registered to enter in for the Mercy Medical team. Oh, I got to tell you, seeing those curtains remind me real quick. Do you see how nicely painted that house is? Like 3 days before the MFT, we drove up there to check out the situation. And we had been there several months before, and it was, filthy and firewood stacked everywhere and just junk everywhere. And they kept saying, we're going to get it all cleaned out. It's going to be great. And I said, well, if you could at least just get rid of all this firewood, then we'd have room for everything. Yeah, no problem. It'll all be great. 3 days before we show up, it's in exactly the same state. And I was like, okay. Well, we drive up for the first day of the first clinic day, and they have repainted the whole house, cleaned it all out, and even hung curtains. And I kept, Stephen Ngauja I always say I'm his right-hand woman. He's a Lutheran pastor, but also a community health officer. I just kept saying, Stephen, they hung curtains. So after registration, you make it inside the building, and then that's time for vitals and intake. And on the right, that's Bonnie Hartman. She is a retired nurse, lives in Illinois. She's come on several Mercy Medical teams. After that is triage, and the white lady in the picture is Donna Mulholland. She is a pastor's wife, but also a registered nurse who just happened to do triage for the Army. So this was right up her alley. And then they move from triage on to consultation. And our consultants are usually locally trained medical providers. They know the people, they know the medications, they know the illnesses, they can do the best job. We have had American medical providers come, and that's awesome, but they always work side by side. So it's a mutually beneficial arrangement. The Americans can learn from the Africans can learn from the Americans. This is Rose Stevens. She's been on 2 MMTs with us in Sierra Leone.
And we don't
and
have
a
time.
tigress. Yeah. If I had
time.
time, I'd tell you an awesome story about her.
And all the local teams, all deeply committed Christians, not necessarily Lutheran, but learning about our faith though, and interested.
Yeah. This is Michael and Danema on the left, checking out a little girl doing consultation. Another community health officer who works with us, and another strong Christian. This is Reverend Michael Awe. He is a pastor in South Sioux City, Nebraska.
Yeah,
right?
Lauren's dad.
Yeah, Lauren Aw's dad. He's been on tons of Mercy Medical teams and other mission trips to Poland and stuff. But this gal came in. Her name was Fatima, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Or Fatumata.
Yeah.
And she was very ill, but she was also scared to death because she thought her illness, she's Muslim, she thought her illness was a direct curse from God, and there was no way she was going to survive. And I'm embarrassed really that this was our treatment room, the bathroom. You see, it is not the most sanitary place, but it was the best we had. But we, hung an IV, and she was there for several hours and she was able to walk out from after receiving all of her treatment. But Pastor Ah stayed by her side, praying with her, singing with her, just showing her Jesus love throughout that entire ordeal. And at the end, she professed faith in Christ. Now, I know, who that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to stick, but that is our prayer. And that's what these mercy medical teams are all about.
But it's also possible she's their Samaritan woman at the well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the follow-up that the church is going to do will bring that to bear. Hopefully.
Yep. Yeah. Then the next step would be labs. And you can see this guy's joyous expression while getting his finger poked for a malaria smear or a malaria test. Then we also do wound care, and the hands that you see dressing that man's foot wound are the hands of a guy named Michael Bio. And I always say, I know your ears perked up when I said that name. He is the direct brother of the president of Sierra Leone, Mada Bio. And we didn't even know that until the second Mercy medical team halfway through. It's not like he walks around, I'm the president's brother. So he's an orthopedic community health officer. So he did all of our wound care. And then after going through treatment, getting your diagnosis, all that stuff, then you come to the pharmacy where we give medication. And we always have a local pharmacist to work with us because they can explain it in the local language. They can explain it in the way that people are used to hearing how to take medication. And they know the medications better than we do because they use different things there than what we do.
They have a system of markings that the illiterate people in the population can understand.
Yeah. Can I tell the story
Sure,
of James?
go for it. Yeah.
So is this Francis?
Yeah, that's
Francis.
Yep.
Francis was the pharmacist's name. And we did not choose wisely our setup for the pharmacy. We were in this old garage area, but we were facing the sun. So it kept moving in, and we kept trying to move back out of the sun. But poor Francis had to sit in the sun because he had to explain the medications to everybody. And it was just boiling hot. And you see, he's got his long lab coat on and everything. Well, we're all working away back in there. I mean, you could see how much I'm sweating in this picture. We're all working away. And I look up, and here is the guy on the right is James Yasa, one of the leaders of the Sierra Leone church, their main educator. I look up, and here he is shading Francis with his body to try to give him some relief from the sun. And I was just so impressed by that.
Sometimes Africans will do that just to show, hey, look what I'm doing. That James is not that guy.
No.
The gospel just permeates that man's bones.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we're already an hour in.
Yeah. Well,
okay. We're getting there.
Yeah.
Anyway, the last step of a Mercy medical team is prayer. And every person who comes through at the end is prayed with. And that's our main goal with these Mercy medical teams, because, everyone who comes through is going to get sick again. And at some point, everyone who comes through is going to die. But if we can introduce them to Jesus, then they will have eternal life. And that's what these are all about.
Yeah, tell them the number served over the 5 days.
I don't remember. Like 5,000.
I
don't
think it was
remember.
3,000.
3,000.
Which is a lot of people in 5 days. Yeah.
So just a real quick story. Our last MMT in Togo, we got there early in the morning, and there was just a young boy. His dad had brought him in the middle of the night. He was unresponsive. We didn't even notice him at first because the dad had just brought him there and laid him in the corner because he didn't really know what to do either. And one of our American nurses saw him, Nurse Melanie Algram. She scooped him up and, went racing down to the pharmacy, calling everybody, hey, we've got a really sick kid here. And so we went down to the pharmacy, one, because that's where all the medications were, and also there's more room down there. So we get him down there, we're taking it.
Storm clouds were gathering.
Yeah,
and
we're
it-
taking his temperature, doing a malaria test. Yes, he's got malaria. His temp's like 106. This is bad. So while the medical people are working on him, you can see this is pastors praying over him. That's Reverend David Elsrode, the white guy, pastor in the East Coast. Go ahead.
The team chaplain.
Yeah, the team chaplain. This is the guy in the blue closest to us is the president of the Lutheran Church of Togo, Reverend Ladi Lambon. And the guy next to him in the striped shirt is the little boy's dad, Yandutian, who, didn't understand what was going on. And just, as you can imagine, very worried and kind of freaked out about it all.
Yeah, he didn't speak any French.
Yeah, very minimal. So we get an IV going, we get some malaria medication into Yandutian, some fever reducer. And then for us Americans, the most heartbreaking part was what happened next, because we said, okay, he's stable. Where do we evacuate him to? And all the local providers looked at us and said, this is the safest place for him, because we had all the medicine he needed and we had a whole bunch of. We actually had the head of the pediatric hospital in Dapong working with us there. So we moved him down to a more private area, and he spent the whole day, just resting in his dad's arms. And then,
well, you got to tell them first what God did with the weather.
Okay, go ahead.
This whole time, storm clouds were brewing. And as they got him over into the pharmacy area where I always work, because I'm non-technical and can help over there, they just put him on the floor, found a mat to put him on. They were working busily on him, and the clouds just opened up with sideways rain. And we were in an open air schoolhouse. It's very hot there. They don't build walls, they need breezes. And the rain was blowing sideways in. And so we had hundreds of people waiting outside to be served, and they rushed into the building, and as many as could get into the room we were in there, probably 200 people. They all had a front row seat to this miraculous work of mercy that God was doing before their eyes. I could not think of a more powerful testimony to the tangible love of God.
So at the end of the day, Yandutian's dad brought him back down to the pharmacy. I mean, this kid was unresponsive when we first found him, or when Melanie first found him. And you can see him in this picture. He's not really like smiling and ready to run around and play, but he is so much better. And we found out later that the name Yandutian means God gives. And on this day, God gave life.
That's the end of our presentation. Just thought it'd update you on the family. Why is that slide there?
I don't know.
It's the next one, I think. This was the most.
That's the best one of our
our new grandchild. This was just taken this morning. We had breakfast after the burial of her mom. We had the first time in about 4 years we had all of us together, all of our 4 kids, and of course their significant others. And so that's our family today. And that's our presentation. Yes, if we have time, we would love to entertain questions. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing so many wonderful photos. It's shocking to see so many great pictures, and everything's so colorful, and it's so great to see, visually see what it's like to live and work where you've been for so many years. Yeah, we had a few questions come in, and more might pop up here. I know we're running a little bit long, so we'll get in a few questions here first. Let's see. From Chris, she mentioned you guys mentioned having a heart for Africa. Can you say more about that? What's kept you there for so many years? And then thank you for your service. It's a real blessing.
Well, I didn't have it when I got there. Steph tells everyone she cried for a year when we got to Northern Togo. There was no internet. No one else like us. The mail took 6 months to get there if it ever got there. We just went into a cultural black hole, if you will, and nothing that was familiar to us. And it was hard. and didn't speak French yet. We were to learn it on the field there and couldn't talk
Not
to people.
recommended.
But God began the humbling process of me on day one. I'm a guy who's healthy, fit, never gets sick, never takes aspirin. You know, I'm blessed. You know, I'm not bragging by that. God has just blessed me with that. Within 24 hours, I had fluids being evacuated from both ends of my body, and rapidly. And I went there as a brand new Christian, and I thought I was going to do this wondrous work for the Lord. Let's go do these great things for God's kingdom. And he started to slowly teach me that why we were there, that people were suffering much more than I was temporarily in their daily lives, and they needed the love of Jesus. And he began the humbling process, the training process of what it means to be a missionary. You're not doing great things for the Lord. He's doing great things. Yeah. And the love grew as we came to know these people, some of the sweetest people on planet Earth. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool how much you realize you don't know about the world when you are transplanted to somewhere else, and God teaches you a lot through that. Let's see, another question from Eric asking about the two Congos. Were they formerly one, or do they get along with each other? What's their relationship like? You know.
So they were both one, right?
It was the Congo Basin. The people groups, there are probably 100 ethnic groups in the big Congo, and only about 3 or 4 in the smaller Congo. What is the Bantu region, Bantu language groups? I mean, that would historically be the kingdoms down there, and then the French and the Belgians divided up the territory. The Belgians took the bigger Congo and the French the smaller one, and that's why we have the nations that we do.
And you oh golly, I gotta plug my computer in. We would be ending very quickly here. You guys have probably heard about the Belgian Congo is just where so many atrocities. The King Leopold, demanded so many hands and baskets every day. It was just an awful place. And then when they were forced to give independence, they were not, nice about it. The British, at least, educated people, taught them how to run a country, gave them opportunities for, education and experience. The Belgians just left in a snit. And you see the results today with how dysfunctional big Congo is right now.
And you think of the Belgians as these nice people who have waffles and
chocolate.
Yeah, they weren't.
At least King Leopold wasn't.
All right, let's see. Are there any other questions? There's lots of thanks, and everyone's thanking you for your presentation. If anyone else has questions, you can put them in the chat. Let's see, Eric has another question. Where were you in the late 1990s? Were you a seminary student around that time? He's asking if you've met at some point, Gary.
He caught that. I was a layman when I first went out, and it came as a business manager, part-time evangelistic missionary, which kind of became, maybe 10% business manager as I got a handle on that and more outreach, and kind of got locally ordained by the pastors I was working with. I raided their theological libraries. I felt like I had a SIM education before I got there. But I did a year toward the SIM with a plan of every 4 years I would do a year of the SIM and go back to the field. But that ended with the Civil War. So from 03 to 05, I finished my studies at the St. Louis SIM.
But your first year was 96, 97?
96, 97. Yeah. Came back, finished 03 to 05. Did a convertible vicarage at a parish in Hillsboro, Missouri, about an hour south of the seminary, and ended up spending 10 years there. It was called in a year as the pastor of the congregation.
Let's see. Carolyn is wondering about COVID. How are you guys getting vaccines? What's the situation like as far as getting vaccines, or the churches in Africa where you work?
It's this is going to be an issue for a while now, because the lower income countries are not happy, accusing the higher income countries of not sharing, hoarding vaccine. But the reality is we don't even have enough for our own people. So we are not away. We're in the States now. We've been here, golly,
Since March.
10 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of COVID. But as far as we're aware, there's nobody getting a vaccination in Congo Brazzaville yet. They have some in South Africa. I don't think they've made it outside of that country.
We have tickets to return. It's a bit of an unknown, and we do have regional responsibilities, the need to travel to different countries. We're not at all sure how that's going to go,
Yeah.
but we are going back. This is solid now. We had tickets for November 1st. That got bumped back because the situation wasn't stabilized enough to January 25th. And then her mom got ill with COVID, and we got permission to bump it back a month to February 25th. And that's what our tickets are for. And I do think we'll be able to honor those tickets and go. But still, I appreciate prayers, because we don't really know what's going to be like.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was going to ask, what are the things that we can pray for most right now? What's most needed, and how can we, anyone who's watching, how can the church support you guys in the best way through prayer?
Certainly these brand new seminaries, be praying for them, and those men being trained there, and the women in the deaconess ministry, and certainly for the loving outreach that Steph's doing to the women. A big prayer concern would be, because of COVID, the Mercy medical teams are shut down for at least a year. We do not want to bring in a super spreader event to these countries. And so until things settle down with COVID, we will not be doing Mercy medical teams again. And you saw what a powerful outreach tool. It really gave that Leonian church a kick in the pants. That they were feeling overwhelmed by the presence of Islam. The church was struggling, and now that they've converted the house where we had the Mercy medical team into an evangelism training center to go into the Muslim villages.
Yeah, and prayers for just how do we travel? When do we travel? Can we get these negative COVID tests? So just all of it's just, it's already complicated to travel in the region. Now it's like
Well, I give you an example on that. One of the first visits we want to make is to the Guinea church. We would traditionally fly into Bamako, the capital of neighboring Mali, but we can't do that anymore because of the Muslim problem. So we have to go into Sierra Leone and then travel overland across an overland border. It's not like an international airport. It's soldiers wearing flip-flops and stuff like that. You never know what you're going to get.
Well, and you can technically you can fly into Sierra Leone, but then you can't go anywhere. There's no travel within country. So it's just a mess.
If you look at Guinea, the map of Guinea, it drapes over other countries. If we went through Conakry, the capital, it would be a 3-day overland trip to get to the forest region where these churches are.
Nobody wants to do that.
Nobody wants to do that.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
Looks like we have one more question. You kind of just talked about it. Jim says, the persecution you described sounds overwhelming. Does that revert new Christians back to Muslim? What does that look like?
That's going on. I am hoping, Satan's not very intelligent. The more he persecutes the church, the more he loses.
Yeah, well, it's definitely something to keep in prayer for sure.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that about wraps it up. If anyone has a last minute question, they can throw it in there in the chat. But yeah, I just want to thank you so much. I've really enjoyed listening to your presentation. So I'm so glad to be able to be a part of this event and share a lot of what missionaries do around the world, because I assume there's quite a few people who've listened who didn't know a lot about any of this work. So it's awesome to hear about it, whether you've known about it for years and participated in missions for years or are brand new to it. So I just want to thank you for sharing. Yeah, there's messages that were saying thank you, God bless you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for
Bless
your
you
work.
all. Thanks for taking time on a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
It's always our joy to tell people about this work, because you can see the hand of God in it, with using warfare to plant churches. We would never in a million years strategize that, but God has used the worst things in this life to bring about the goodness of people being brought into eternal life.